I'm Greg Tepper. That's Greg Powers, and this is This Week
in Cruton.
It's This Week in Recruiting with our recruiting analyst, Greg Powers of Next Level Athlete. Follow him on Twitter at GPowersScout and follow Next Level Athlete on Twitter at NextLevelD1. Max is making a face.
For some reason, the intro credits just started rolling.
Cool.
Yeah. Anyway.
Nice.
Whatever.
Timing's off.
I have no idea why that has happened. I didn't do anything.
Anyway.
They just started rolling.
Per usual. A lot of Cruton talk. A lot of Cruton in the news.
Curbing down a little bit though over the last couple of weeks, which should be the way it is as we head into August.
It would be impossible to have the same amount of news that we've had like the last 3 weeks.
It's crazy.
Every week, so a little bit less, but still some big time things to get to. Let's start with our prospect on the rise. Let's talk about 2020 cornerback Colin Campbell out of Argyle Liberty Christian. Went a little viral.
Yeah.
Went a little bit viral. He posted a video of him running a 4.36 in the 40.
After a workout, he says.
After a workout.
Nice.
Okay, that's fine. I see you. Obviously very impressive. We can't draw a straight line between it, but we tend to believe that considering Notre Dame offered almost immediately after he posted that, maybe that did a little bit of good, but this is not the first offer he's had.
I can see the Notre Dame coaches sitting in their offices right now with hand timers clocking his Twitter 40-yard dash.
And then picking up the phone.
Right.
And be like, oh, hey, Colin, you want to come play for Notre Dame?
Which is what I did, and I got pretty close to 4.36, so I had a little fun with it. Everybody could watch the video and the story.
But what's interesting, though, is that he had kind of already named a top 5,
right,
which did not include Notre Dame because they had not offered. Now, things may end up changing a little bit for Colin Campbell.
I think UTSA is going to have a really hard time in this race
tough.
now.
Yeah.
UTSA made that top 5. I think Texas Tech sits in a pretty good spot for his recruitment right now. He took an official visit there already. They've been on a pretty hot streak over the last few weeks on the trail. That's one to definitely watch. And then now Notre Dame. Private school kid north of Dallas. I'd have to think that Notre Dame offers him something that he would want to seriously consider. He has mentioned that he'll consider that, but is it too late in the process for Collin? We'll have to wait and see, but he's a really good kid. One of those ones who's kind of grown up right before our eyes. When he first started bursting onto the scene, so to speak, I wouldn't have projected him to necessarily be the type of guy that gets this level of offer. But he's continued to improve his game year by year.
He is he's an impressive specimen out there.
Yep.
Clocking in 5'11", 5'10", 175 pounds. A true corner there on the outside, and you got to feel like Colin Campbell of Argyle Liberty Christian's a name you're going to continue to hear from.
And Argyle Liberty Christian had a good season last year. I think they went to the state championship game in TAP, so they're definitely a team on the rise in the private school.
Speaking of teams that went to state championship games, commit of the week is a guy whose name we are pretty familiar with, who's been featured on this segment.
I think this is his third time.
Yep.
And we're talking about him about a school that we've talked about a lot.
Yep.
Oklahoma has picked up a commitment from Gruver 2020, calling him a tight end, Jaylen Conyers. This is a guy who played receiver for Gruver last year en route to a state championship game, title game berth. He will play quarterback for the Greyhounds this year. This is a small-town kid who plays very, very big, not just because of his frame, 6'5", 215, but this is a guy who makes plays, a big-time basketball player as well. But he had offers from a lot of different players, but the Sooners end up nabbing Jaylen Conyers.
And this is one that we've been back and forth on as far as his position is concerned, and we're going through the prospect rankings on DCTF to cement our Hot 100, which will be released very soon on the site. And we have switched his position to tight end. He's committed to Oklahoma to play on the offensive side of the football, and that makes him the number 1 tight end in the state for the class of 2020, which is a pretty big deal because there's guys like Elijah Yelverton, who's committed to Iowa on that list, Brandon Frazier, who's committed to Arkansas. The thing that I think Conyers brings to the table is his pass catching ability and athleticism. Overall athleticism. As you mentioned, he's a great basketball player, and you can see that when you watch his highlight tape on the grid. And another thing to really look at when you're talking about Conyers and his fit at Oklahoma is I think he'll form a great 1-2 punch with the tight end that they signed last year in Austin Stogner, who is a good pass catcher, but I think grows into be a more traditional inline tight end, whereas I think Conyers is an extra receiver in that offense, and they can complement each other in Norman.
Yes, he is. He's a big time player. I remember last year seeing a highlight, and I think it went kind of viral. It was in like a quarterfinal or a semifinal where he flat out hurdled a dude who was more or less standing up straight.
Yep.
And it was unbelievable. But Jaylen Conyers is a freak, and you saw him in that state championship game. I know he was bottled up pretty well by Mart, but this is a game-breaking type guy who is going to be an impact player for Gruver this year, and obviously, should he hold his commitment to Oklahoma, will be a player for Lincoln Riley's squad. We're talking with Greg Powers of Next Level Athlete here on Texas Football Today. Get involved in the conversation, #TF Today. Let's get to our underclassmen of the week. To Lancaster we go, a program not shy about putting out big-time athletes. They got another one in their wide receiver, Majik Rector, Majik. I had to ask you how to say it. I just want to make sure, but it is Majik Rector, and he made a commitment this week to play for Kansas. This is a guy who is, I would say, a little bit undersized at the moment, but when you watch his tape, you can figure out pretty quickly that he's almost a complete package. This guy is really, really special.
He's very precise in his route running, very quick, 4.22 pro shuttle, so that kind of talks about his ability to move in space. And credit to Emmett Jones, who the former South Oak Cliff head coach has done a tremendous job in the Dallas area of identifying top wide receivers and then luring them to Kansas. And Majik is next in line, and he plays on a Lancaster team that's just loaded with skill players. You know, you've got Tron Jackson, Latrell Caples, Trey Bradford at running back, and I think Lancaster's going to be they're going to be a tough out this year.
They are, and they're a team that we're always interested in. Love Chris Gilbert. He's one of our favorite coaches here at Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Last year, I think, was a little bit of a disappointment, but not up to their standard. But they've got the playmakers. I mean, there is no doubt about that. They've got the horses to run there in Lancaster, and one of the big reasons why is Majik Rector. The 2021 Lancaster kid is a commitment to Kansas at the moment. Finally, let's get to our recruit of the week. And I have read more tweets about this guy this week than probably any other recruit, and it's Cy Ridge defensive end Vernon Broughton. Broughton?
Yep, you got it.
Vernon Broughton. I think a big reason why he was supposed to commit this week. Monday. He's pushed it back. Kind of indefinitely. We don't really know, but it still could come
tomorrow.
Could come tomorrow.
We're thinking it'll probably be this week still.
He's probably the top defensive end in the state.
We have him rated number 1. I mean, it's an interesting year because you have in the top 3 Vernon Broughton, who could play defensive tackle too. You're talking about these jumbo-sized DNs now who could also play on the interior, but most of them are looking at schools where they can play that 3-4 edge position that's basically a defensive tackle, but it's considered as a defensive end.
But the thing for me and I think the reason why I've read so many tweets about him is because it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have your finger closer to the pulse than I do, it seems like this is a flat-out Texas versus A&M recruiting battle.
Ohio State's done a good job to make a push and keep themselves in the mix, but I agree with you. I think it's going to come down to Texas versus Texas A&M. We're also behind the DCTF Hot 100 2020 rankings. We'll be pushing out a story of the top 10 predictions on the uncommitted prospects in the state, and a little preview of that is I do predict that Broughton will end up at Texas, and I think that he'll be a really good fit in that defense if he picks there. But I think either Texas or Texas A&M can show him a clear path to success in both of their defenses.
Absolutely.
So that's why I think those schools make the most sense. He also seems like a guy who would like to stay closer to home, but I'm a big believer when it comes to recruiting. Watch what they do, not necessarily listen to what they say. And he's taken a lot of trips to Austin, and he's had a lot of action on social media throughout his recruitment in regards to the Longhorns, and I think that they've just done a tremendous job in his recruitment overall from start to finish. 2
other news and notes in the recruiting dump. We would be remiss if we didn't mention that Jahari Rogers, the Arlington quarterback, who likely profiles as a cornerback in college, made his pledge to Florida this week. That seems like a really nice pickup for the Gators, who don't do a ton of recruiting in Texas, but sure reeled in a pretty big fish here.
And they beat out Texas for Rogers' commitment, and they've they've been making strides in Texas because you have another guy in E.J. Smith at Dallas Jesuit who, of course, his dad played at Florida that you want to keep a close eye on. And they have another defensive back within our top 100, Avery Helm, who's already announced a commitment to Florida as well. Rodgers is a good get for Florida. I really love his upside. You mentioned he plays quarterback in high school, but getting to watch him in the state 7-on-7 and in the state qualifying tournaments exclusively at corner showed what he can really bring to the table. Because you can't put your hands on people in Texas whenever you defend them, and he locks down one side of the field. He's very aggressive, and he has the size and tools that college coaches drool over when they're looking at a cornerback prospect.
And then before we let you go, I want to talk a little bit about SMU for two reasons. First and foremost, I want to talk about the commitment they got this week from we slot him as an outside linebacker. I think Westbrook plays him at a defensive end, but Jay Bell, the defensive end from Beaumont Westbrook, commits to SMU. He led the team in sacks last year with 9. He was all over the place, a guy he's a disruptor in the backfield. This seems like a really nice get for SMU. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, am I overstating the Rashad Samples to SMU thing? I think that is Rashad Samples is leaving the Texas staff to move to SMU and Sonny Dykes' staff. This is a guy who people may remember him from playing at Skyline for his dad,
right.
Reginald Samples, now the coach at Duncanville. But he has established himself, I think, in pretty short order as being a pretty solid hand on the recruiting trail. This is a pretty big get for SMU, right?
And Texas has done a pretty good job of making this in-office staff position in recruiting the guy on their staff. They did it with Brian Carrington, and now they've done it with Rashad Samples, and Samples is able to move on to SMU to be an on-the-field coach, which I think is a great move for him. He gets to come back to Dallas where he played his high school football, and I agree with you. I think it's a huge move for SMU. They get a young, energetic guy who understands the recruiting landscape in the DFW and also statewide. He's in a very short amount of time turned his name into something big as it relates to recruits. Played a big role, I think, in helping Jaquindon Jackson find a spot in Texas. Was probably a huge reason why Chris Thompson has Texas towards the top of his list. Both guys, of course, playing for his father at Duncanville. And now he'll be able to bring that energy to SMU, and we'll see just in a short amount of time if he can do the same thing there. I mean, it is going to be different. It's way different recruiting for SMU than it is for Texas. Of course it is. But we'll see. They have to keep the best Dallas players at home, and that's where it starts for SMU, and they've been behind that theory over the last couple years.
Max?
Yes, we have a question for Mr. Powers, as usual, because people love this segment, and they can't get enough of it. Andrew Christensen asks, are the private school kids tougher to evaluate as they may not have the exposure that kids from UIL schools do, and the level of competition week in and week out may not be at the same level?
I don't know that they're tougher to evaluate. I would say the answer to that is no. You have to evaluate kids based on their level of competition no matter where it is. You know, if you're talking about a guy like Jaylen Conyers, who we talked a little bit about, playing for a small school in Texas, you have to understand when you're watching his tape, he's not playing against teams that are out there like Duncanville playing Duncanville versus North Shore. And that's the same way that you have to evaluate private school teams. One thing that is different in private school than a lot of UIL schools is the depth just isn't there. So there's some opportunity there for some kids to step on the field when they may have not been able to at their UIL school.
All right.
He is Greg Powers of Next Level Athlete. Follow him on Twitter at GPowersScout. Follow Next Level Athlete on Twitter at NextLevelD1. And I guess we'll see you in Houston, my friend.
We'll do it.
All right. There he goes, Greg Powers.